Welcome to Not Starving Artists, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm answering a question that I get all the time, which is, do you need an LLC as an artist? Now, this question has a lot more questions behind it. So even though it seems like a simple question, we're going to go into the layers of like why you might be asking this question. So we're of course going to talk about what an LLC is, the difference between an LLC and a sole proprietorship. If you've heard the term S Corp thrown around, we're going to talk about that. We're going to do like a little legal business entity crash course. And then we're going to talk a little bit about tax deductions, because a lot of times what this LLC question is wrapped up in is being able to deduct more, have more tax benefits. So we're going to talk about what that could actually look like for artists and creatives. And then we're going to talk about organizing your money and separating your business and personal finances. Because again, the core of what this question is asking is, do I need to separate my personal life from my creative career, from my artistic career? Now, if you have a business in general, I also want you to know that a lot of this will apply to you. So if you have a coaching business, if you're a service provider, if you are running a business or doing like freelance work that you don't necessarily consider creative, I'd venture to say that every kind of business venture is a creative venture. But I also want to say that this will all apply to you as well. But a lot of the examples I'm going to use are going to be artist and actor focused. So that's what we're going to cover today. It's going to be a lot of tactical, practical. And then at the end, we're going to talk more about that organization piece and to really answer this question, why you need to have all of these pieces of information and really actually focusing on your financial organization. Okay. So let's start off with an LLC. What does that even mean? What is a sole proprietorship? Let's talk about the S Corp question. Let's get into it. So the question, do I need an LLC as an artist? This is different than asking about tax deductions and tax benefits. So an LLC is a legal entity. What I want you to think about is legal protections around your business. So this has nothing to do with tax and finances. This is all about legal protection. So when you create your LLC, basically what you are doing is you are creating a protective legal bubble around your business, right? Or your artistic career. If we're talking about creating an LLC as an artist, that would be, I'll use myself as an example, right? Brooke Tyler Benson, that's my legal equity name, my actors union name. Brooke Tyler Benson would be protected legally if I became Brooke Tyler Benson LLC. Now that's different than Brooke Benson who's vibing out here day to day in her life, okay? So it's not about taxes, it's about legal protections. Now why you would want this is if you got sued as an artist, if someone came after you and said like, hey, you breached your contract or something as an actor and I want to sue you, that means that they would only be able to sue your LLC because they're suing your artistic career. They wouldn't be able to touch any of your assets or finances in your personal life, right? And vice versa. You got sued personally, nobody could touch what is existing in your LLC bubble, right? Your legal entity over here. So that's what an LLC does. Okay, so for most artists, now we're going to get into nuance here. I'm going to start talking about taxes here in a minute. But as an artist, most artists, you are not in the high risk level of getting sued, of having litigation posed against you as an actor, as an artist. Now, if you have a product-based business as an artist where you are selling goods that you are creating and making, yes, maybe having that legal protection would be beneficial because you're now transacting dollars for a good and you are collecting money for a product that you've sold, versus when you are working as an actor, right? And you're being hired by a company, right, for your services. They have a lot of stuff set up to like bring you into their fold, versus if you are an artist with like a polymer clay business, right, and you're selling product, that's like you are the entity setting up the structure and people are paying you. So even though both ways you're getting paid, it's like how you're getting paid and collecting money. One lends itself to higher risk in the legal category, and one lends itself to lower risk in the legal category. So I also want to preface this with, I am not an attorney. I am not a legal professional at all. I am not a CPA. I am not a tax professional. All of this is for educational purposes only. And I'm sharing with you generalizations, right? This is not legal advice or tax advice. This is purely my experience, my opinions, and information for you to do with as you wish, all right? So that's what an LLC is. Now I want to define what a sole proprietor is, because if you are an artist that has not become an LLC, you have not put those legal protections around your artistic career, you are a sole proprietor. So when people say freelancer, that's another word for sole proprietor, right? Like if you are collecting money for services that you are rendering and you do not have a business entity, you are automatically grandfathered into what is called a sole proprietorship. You are a single person that is not like legally protected as a business, and you are collecting money for other things. Like when you're a freelancer, when you call yourself that, that's what being a sole proprietor is, okay? Sole proprietor and LLC have the same exact tax benefits. You can claim the same amount of exemptions, deductions, right? All the things that you could do as a sole proprietor, you could do as an LLC. All right. The only difference is legal protection. The main difference, let me just say, the main big difference is legal protections. Okay. So that's the first part of the LLC conversation. Now, what also gets brought into this conversation, and what I've heard asked as well, is like, I hear that I should become an S Corp to save money on taxes. Is that something I should do? So let me define what an S Corp is. So when you elect to be taxed as an S Corp, that means that you want the IRS to tax you like a corporation, okay? What that means is that you are going to get a little bit more tax benefit. You're going to get to pay less taxes, right? But what it also means is that you have now added on upkeep costs to legally exist at this higher level of like corporate entity. All right. So you have to put yourself on payroll, which means you have to pay for a payroll software. For example, the one I use is Gusto. Okay. And you have to pay a monthly fee for that. You are now paying for like paperwork to get filed. I mean, in New York City, it's crazy. Because, okay, let me also back up. To elect S Corp status, you have to have an LLC. So your LLC can elect S Corp status. So to file your LLC and file this paperwork, that costs more money. Usually your bookkeeper, your accountant will have higher fees for doing bookkeeping for S corporations. So the rule of thumb, kind of the benchmark that's thrown around is if you are profiting between like 40 and 60K, usually you want to be on that 60K end. Profiting $60,000 in your, like if we're talking artistic career, you are profiting 60K or more in your artistic career. That means like after you've taken out all of your deductions that you're taking out of your taxes, your tax liability, 60K, that would be when it becomes beneficial to elect an S Corp status for your LLC. Because at that point, the amount of taxes that you would be saving is going to offset the upkeep costs of becoming an S Corp and continuing to be an S Corp. Okay. Now, if that kind of started to get a little too in the weeds for you, that is okay. Because when you get to this point, you will have a CPA on your team, okay? You do not want to be going into the S Corp world and all of that tax world without a team member to help lead you through it and give you advice and give you recommendations and walk you through the process. So I just wanted to explain sole proprietor versus LLC versus S Corp, because that's the question that's being asked at face value. But what I hear when someone asks that question is, I want to lower my taxes, I should become an LLC so I can take more deductions. Or I know I need to separate my business and my personal life, so I should get an LLC to separate things like financially and legally. So we're answering the face value question to be like, I don't think that's the question you're actually asking, but I want you to have that information and understanding. Okay, so now let's talk about the tax element of what this question is really trying to ask. So taking deductions as an artist, all that means is that if you spend $1,000 on headshots, and I'm going to use really easy numbers so I can do the math in my head as I'm talking this through. If you spend $1,000 on headshots 1 year and you make $10,000 as an actor and artist, right? So you've got $10,000 that you've made and you've spent $1,000 as an expense. What a tax deduction is you are going to subtract that $1,000 from the $10,000 that you made, right? Which is $9,000. That's what's called your profit, right? So you have revenue and you have expenses. Revenue is how much you've brought in. Expenses is the things you spent to run your business, right? And then profit is revenue minus expenses. Your profit is what you pay taxes on. So one of the myths or the misconceptions about tax deductions is that, like, if I spend $1,000 on headshots, that basically means I'm not paying for it because I'm subtracting $1,000 from the taxes I pay. That's not how it works. You're subtracting the expenses from your revenue, creating a new number, which is your profit, and now you're paying taxes on that new number. Okay, so about 25% is what is recommended to save for taxes. That's what I recommend all my clients do. For freelance work, for sole proprietor work, if you're an LLC, right? Even when you're an S Corp, 25% of your profit is a really good amount to put into a savings account every single month, every single quarter, to make sure you're never behind on taxes. So you're paying 25% of that $9,000, right? That's your taxable income, is that $9,000. So tax deductions lowers your taxable income, okay? It's not like a 1-for-1. I'm gonna pay for this and then I get to subtract it from what I'm paying in taxes. So tax deductions are important because we want to lower your taxable income, but it's also, we're rewatching Schitt's Creek right now, and it's, David, when he's like, it's a write-off. The tax people, they write it off. And Johnny's like, yeah, but who's paying for it? That's what's running through my mind right now. So that's why I wanted to do that little overview there. So tax deductions for artists. The first thing I want to say is, again, check with your CPA. The tax code is changing all the time. Tax laws are changing all the time. Deduction rules are changing all of the time. We've just had this bill get passed that has changed a lot of tax deductions, especially for businesses and corporations. So your CPA should have all of that information. You can also do your own research if you desire, but what I will say is when you really start to get in the weeds with deductions, when you're making a certain amount of money, when you have a certain amount of variety of income, it behooves you to have someone who you trust as a CPA on your team to help navigate the wild world of taxes, right? Like, there are people who have devoted their entire profession to taxes. So I just want you to know it's okay if this is confusing. I want you to be able to understand it at a high level, but having someone on your team to support you through this is always a good idea, okay? But what I'm going to share with you right now is what I have implemented for myself with taxes, and I've also talked with my CPA about it, and I've done my own research, right? And here's the deductions, kind of the overview of for artists and actors. This is what you can expect. So tax deductions for artists need to be ordinary and necessary business expenses. That's the language that is used. So ordinary and necessary business expenses are things like your union dues, agent manager fees, any equipment like your ring light, your backdrop, classes, training, coaching, headshots, right? Not only getting them done, but then having them printed. Your website subscription, Actors Access, Casting Networks, Backstage, any of those platforms. Your accountant, right? If you have an accountant to help you file your taxes, that is a deductible expense. And then also travel. So if you are traveling for a gig, right? Like if you are a local hire in a certain state, but you don't live in that state, right? And you have to pay for your own travel to get over there. Travel can be a deduction. Mileage can be a deduction. That is like if you are driving to auditions and to work, you can deduct your mileage. Now, I want to give a couple of like nuances here with travel deductions specifically. So the travel needs to be for work. It can't be like a trip that then you like go to an audition during and now you can write off the entire trip. Now, there are a myriad of ways that accountants and CPAs and tax professionals, like there's a spectrum of how in the gray area they're willing to be with how they file. Because like the tax code is full of gray area, right? Like ordinary and necessary business expenses, that is so up for debate, right? Of like what that actually means. So there are CPAs who will tell you you can write off your entire life. Like anything you ever buy can be a write-off. And then there are certain, guys, my alarm's going off. I've got to get in line for my audition happening next week. If you are an equity member and this is your weekly routine and you have your alarm set for 11:45 and 11:51 and then 12 o'clock, 12:03 and 12:05 because you're going to forget that you're in the waiting room, right there with you, baby. All right, I'm in the waiting room. We're back. So there will also be CPAs on the other end of the spectrum that like don't want you to write off anything that could even remotely be in the gray area. I like to find a CPA who's like a little bit in the middle, right? Like we can push things a little bit to the edge, but we're not going full into like, we're going to write off everything because then that would make me more susceptible to an audit. So again, who your CPA is, you want to find someone that you trust and that you are in alignment with of like how much in the gray you want to be, right? So again, the things I'm saying right now, there might be CPAs who have different recommendations on this, but for the most part, right, travel needs to be specifically for a project, specifically for work, for your artistic career, not just like one meeting thrown in there and then you can deduct the whole thing. The other thing I'll say is that like deducting meals while you're traveling, you can only deduct 50% of the cost, right? You can't write off the entire amount of the meal. Okay. The other thing I want to note about deductions is that you can deduct your health insurance premiums, right? If you are paying for your own premiums, right? You're not employed by an employer. You can deduct those premiums, but you can only do that if you're profiting in whatever you're deducting for. So if you're profiting as an actor in your artistic career, you can deduct your health insurance premiums, but they can't like exceed how much you are making in your career path, which sometimes as an actor, you might not be profiting some years. Like last year, I did not profit at all. I was very much in the red. I should have pulled up my books to see like what I was like negative, I think 3,000, right? Because I got headshots last year and there was some classes that I was taking that put me in the red, right? As an actor. So I didn't profit. This year I am profiting as an actor, right? But there are some years, again, with artistic careers, we're going to get to this in a minute with like slingshot energy as actors. Sometimes our business finances don't make sense and that's okay, right? But it's about you having an awareness about what's going on. So this is why it's also important to understand your numbers and have a really simple way to understand and deduct and track all of this without needing to be like in a million spreadsheets and like doing all this math, which I'm going to get to in a minute, because I think this is another layer underneath the question, do I need an LLC as an artist, is how do I start treating my artistic career as a business, right? And we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so that's like kind of a general overview of things that you can deduct. And we'll talk about how to track this in a minute as well when we talk about organization. So the things that are like kind of basic no's to deduct that I hear a lot of like, oh, I can deduct this as an actor, especially content creation, right? Of like, okay, I'm going to deduct getting my nails done because I'm constantly like on video, or like that's part of like my presentation in the world. Makeup, haircuts, audition clothes, even regular clothes. Those are not considered deductions. Now, there probably are some CPAs out there who will say like, yes, you can deduct everything and here's all the ways you can. a lot of the CPAs that I've worked with were on the other end, right? Of like, all of that stuff is just normal day-to-day stuff. It would be harder to justify to the IRS, here's why I need this for my business and not at all for my normal life, which is kind of the benchmark of what they're going for. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. Okay, so now we've talked about deductions, but it's like, how do you even track this? How do you even like take the deductions? How do you separate your business and your personal finances? Let's get into it, okay? So separation is the key word that I want you to be hearing here. Separation is more important than having like a particular business bank account, actually going to a business bank and having an account there. The separation is what's important. Now, coming back to the sole proprietorship versus LLC conversation and why it's important that you understand the difference is because an LLC is a legal entity, right? It's putting that protective bubble around your career, your business, whatever you've decided to protect, which means you are legally obligated to have a separate set of bank accounts that are only owned and operated and used by that entity. Okay, so if you have an LLC, you must have a separate checking account and savings account and credit card for that entity. Okay, and you will get that by registering for an EIN, which you need. That's your employer identification number. You'll get that when you get your LLC, and you'll have that number that will help you open all of those business bank accounts. You'll register the accounts and the credit card in the business's name, in the LLC's name, okay? And that will be separate. Now, if you are a sole proprietor, you don't necessarily need to have separate bank accounts. Like, it's not legally required of you to have separate bank accounts and a separate credit card, okay? But separation is going to give you clarity. It's what's going to allow tax time to be easy when you are filing, trying to understand the numbers. It's going to require less math of you because everything is separate on a different credit card or in a different bank account. Now, there are varying degrees of separation that you can have as an artist and an actor in your finances. And I'm going to give you two specific examples of what this could look like. I'm going to give you an example of my client's money flow as an artist with an LLC. And I'm going to give you an example of me as an artist with an LLC, not for my artistry, an LLC for my business, and functioning as a sole proprietor as an actor. Okay? So I'm going to talk about all of that in a minute. So stay with me and I'll give you some examples. I want you to have clarity on what you are spending in your acting and artistic career and what you are making in your acting and artistic career, okay? So the money flow method, if you've heard me talk about the money flow method, I mean, you have if you've been here a while. If you haven't been here a while, what the money flow method does is it's separating your bank accounts and your money to understand exactly what you're bringing in month to month to month as a creative with fluctuating income. So already, if you implement the money flow method, you already understand your income every single month. And you can see exactly how much you're bringing in, how much it's fluctuating every single month. So you already have an understanding of the income piece of it as an artist just by implementing the money flow method. All right. The thing that I want you to add in is a separate place where you are spending on your acting career or your artistic career. So for me, all that looks like is a separate credit card that all of my acting expenses go on. So I have I believe it's like the Chase Flex Freedom, something like that. I can't remember what one it actually is called. But I have a Chase credit card that the only thing that ever gets spent on that credit card are acting expenses. So when I need to reserve a rehearsal studio, when I need to buy a train ticket to an audition, when I need to, all of my subscriptions for like my equity dues and my Squarespace website, all of those things are all auto paid from that credit card. So every single expense as an actor is on that card. And you know how this makes it so easy for me during tax time is because all I have to do is pull those bank statements and that's all of my deductions, okay? I'm going to talk about a bookkeeping software in a second, but I want to show you how easy it is to track your deductions and your expenses in your acting career by just opening a separate credit card and just using that for all the expenses, okay? So it's all in one place. Now, an added layer to this to help you, again, understand your numbers and make your life really easy at tax time, whether you have a CPA or you're doing your taxes yourself, either way, you're still going to have to pull all of your information, either for you to file or for you to give to your CPA to file. I think one of the biggest myths about getting an accountant, getting a CPA, having a tax professional on your team who's helping you file, who's filing for you, is that like you won't have to worry about taxes or think about taxes at all. No, like you actually have to be a little more on your shit and organized to be able to correctly give your accountant all of the things that they need to be able to file. So this is about making your life so much easier. So you're not scrambling. You're just doing a little bit of organization at every single monthly financial CEO party to track your artistic finances, your actor finances. So having a bookkeeping software. Now, I'm going to even pull back. Bookkeeping. All that means is tracking your expenses and your income. That's all bookkeeping is. You could do bookkeeping on a Google spreadsheet. You can also use a software like QuickBooks is one of the big ones that a lot of tax professionals use. I use one called Wave. I really like Wave. The interface just feels a lot less like cumbersome and more user friendly of like, it's more simple for me, my eyeballs to see. So I use this one called Wave. And a bookkeeping software, how you can use it to make your life easier is you can hook up that credit card that you use for your actor expenses to the bookkeeping software. So it automatically imports all of your expenses. And then all you have to do during your CEO party is go in and add your actor income every single month of like, yep, I worked on this commercial and I did this short film and got this payment, and then I helped produce, and so I got this paycheck for this thing, and you just put those in. And then the great thing about a bookkeeping software is you can put the receipts into the software, so you don't have to have like a messy Google folder or like physical receipts that you're hoping, or like pictures on your phone. You can just put them all into the software, and then at the end of the year, you don't even have to do anything when you need to collect all your stuff for tax time. It's all just there. You just export the PDF. That's all you have to do. Do you see how like adding in a little bit of this separation and organization actually makes your life so much easier so you're not scrambling during tax time? And it's going to make your CPA's life a lot easier as well, okay? So that's how you can utilize a bookkeeping software to even just, not even for tax time and like legal tax reasons, but also for your brain space. Did you hear how I was like, I know that I operated at a loss last year as an actor, and I was willing to spend more than I was bringing in as an actor, right? In year 2 of living in New York City, because I was building foundations and wanting to make specific investments to receive yield in the future. And now this year, I'm operating at a profit, right? Because of the decisions I made last year and what I wanted to spend money on, even though I was technically at a loss, now I'm profiting, and that was the goal. But do you see how the awareness of it is so important? It doesn't mean that I can't make the decision to operate at a loss as an actor. I can make that choice, but it's about having the awareness to make that choice and to decide how much I am able to and willing to invest in my artistic career. Because remember, at the end of the day, this shit is the long game. We are talking sustainability. I want you doing your artistic shit well into your 90s, okay? I want you sustainable as fuck. That's why I want to make sure that how you understand your artistic career finances and your personal finances and how they match up together and how you're moving forward, like that this is a sustainable way you're going to be living your life for 5 years down the road, 30 years down the road, again, well into your 90s. So to go back to organization and separation, I'm going to give you 2 examples, right? So for me, I've already talked about it a little bit, but because my acting career, when we're talking business finances wise, it's not profiting at a high level right now. I operated at a loss last year. I think I'm profiting right now so far. I'm like profiting $3,000 to $5,000, I think, at this point in the year, which is very exciting as an actor to be profiting, right? So I know that those numbers don't require a totally separate money flow for me right now. Okay, so all that it requires of me right now is having a separate credit card that I put all of my actor expenses on, and I pay that off through my personal money. I have a savings bucket called Acting Career, and I pull money from that bucket whenever I make a bigger purchase, right? Like I want to take an acting class and I'm paying $500 for the couple of weeks of classes, or I'm paying to get new headshots, right? And that's a big chunk of money. I'll pull it from that savings bucket to be able to pay off that credit card. Otherwise, those like normal monthly subscriptions, I just add that into my monthly firm number so I'm aware of it and I have enough money for it. Firm and flex and savings buckets, these are all parts of the money flow method. This is what I teach you to set up the foundation of how to manage your money as an artist, as a creative, inside of my online course, Cashed Up Creative. So you can learn all about that there's the link in the show notes to join Cashed Up Creatives. You can read about what's inside, the modules, etc. All that's link in the show notes. I just have the credit card. And then when I get paid as an actor, that drops into my landing strip account, right? My separate checking account that's bringing all of my income in, and it's piling up through the month. Now, that's also the account that when I get paid from my business, when I get my monthly salary paycheck into my personal bank account from my business financial ecosystem, from my business money flow, that also lands in my landing strip. So I have like multiple places I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid from Not Starving Artist. I, worked a background gig this month. And then I also worked a commercial this month, right? So all of those things are getting dropped into the landing strip all in one place, right? So that is, my acting life is still existing inside of my personal money flow, but I have a separate credit card for those expenses. And then I have a separate bookkeeping page, business basically, inside of my software that I was talking about earlier called Wave, where I track all of my business income, and those expenses that get spent on that credit card come into that software as well. So when my accountant files my taxes for me, she's filing my sole proprietor acting career, and she's filing my Not Starving Artist LLC S Corp business taxes, okay? So she's filing these two separate things, and then like stuff in my personal life, okay? So I basically function during my CEO party as actor Brooke, personal life Brooke, like Brooke Tyler Benson, Brooke personal life Brooke, and Not Starving Artist CEO, okay? So I only have two money flows, one for Not Starving Artist and one for my personal life, and my actor life is a part of my personal money flow. Now, I have a client who, she's a voiceover artist, and she was profiting or making $500K plus in a year, right? Specifically from being a voiceover artist, from her artistic career. So her artistic career, she had an LLC, and she elected to be taxed as an S Corp, right? Because again, she was well over that 60K profit margin, so it made sense to save on taxes that way. So she had a totally separate money flow for her business. She had a business checking account, business savings account, and her artistic career. Oh, it's noon. Gotta get my slot. Let's see what number I am today. But she had a totally separate money flow. So like I have a money flow for Not Starving Artist, and my client, she had a money flow for her voiceover artistry, and then her voiceover artistry would pay her, give her a paycheck from that. So there's, again, varying levels of how much separation you need and that you desire, and that makes sense for you. So again, for her, she was invoicing clients. So again, like this is artistry, how we function in like getting paid in business entities, like it's all a bit archaic from like brick and mortar businesses and like how we understand artistic businesses, because there's so many varying kinds, right? So as a voiceover artist, I'm number 317. I'm right on the cusp. Who knows if I'm going to get my slot. Okay, so there's varying levels and different ways that we function as artists. So as a voiceover artist, she's invoicing clients, right? Like, yes, clients are hiring her and paying her, but she's sending the invoices, and she's functioning more as her own island. Now, as an actor, like when I was working on a show earlier this year, I was getting pulled into their ecosystem. Like I was being hired on, but I was like in their structure, getting paid. And again, getting paid on a W-2. Sometimes you're 1099, sometimes you're W-2. So for her, it makes total sense to have a totally separate ecosystem because she's the one invoicing and also at her profit level, right? So I want to give you examples that there's so many different ways this can look based on your personal situation. So this is also when I talk about one-on-one money mentorship, private clients, and getting clarity on how you want to personalize your money flow and your cash flow system. This is what I'm talking about, because there's so many different ways that it can look, and we need to not only make it make sense for how you're getting paid and how you're spending money and what your business looks like, but also how it makes sense for your brain, right? Like your personality, your brain type, how you understand numbers and money. Like, we need to make sure that all fits for you, okay? So those are the examples there. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about understanding your numbers as an actor, as an artist. One of the things I mentioned earlier is like there's a fear that once you start tracking your artistic expenses, once you start tracking your actor expenses, that you're going to be really scared of what you're going to find. Because I think there's this fear of like, once I start tracking, I'm going to have to cut back because I'm not profiting. Or like I'm going to feel bad of how much I'm spending without seeing like an ROI, right? There's a lot of fear wrapped up in there. But I want to tell you, like, you've made that up. Like the rule that like, oh, I have to be profiting in my acting career to feel good. See, this is all of my alarms are going off right now. I should have just paused until this was. No, I'm not going to pause, because this is what being an actor is like. I'm recording my podcast, and also I have to get in line to get a freaking audition next week, right? It's the life of an actor, baby. Okay, so you made up the rule that like you have to be profiting in your artistic career to feel good about what you're doing in your artistic career. So when I was talking about slingshot energy earlier, I like mentioned that. I want to elaborate more on that, because as actors and artists, a lot of the times we're functioning in we're going to pull back, right? Like a slingshot, right? You pull it backwards to then shoot forwards. A lot of times that's what it looks like for us. We're doing a lot of investing, pulling backwards, right? Like we're taking classes, we're going to one-on-one, we're putting energy into our marketing materials. We're putting not just like financially resources, but also time and energetic resources to then the movie gets made, we get booked, right? We get on the show, we have whatever it is, and you shoot forward, and then the paycheck comes in, right? Or then the accolade comes in, whatever it is that you're deeming as like successful as an artist. I mean, I've talked a lot about that. We're not going to go into that today, okay? But slingshot energy means that sometimes your books financially are not going to look like how a financial business consultant would want them to look. Like any business finance person worth their salt would look in an actor's book and be like, literally, you're insane. What are you actually doing, right? But we know in our hearts that that's what it looks like. That sometimes we do have to operate at a loss to be able to operate at a profit in the future, okay? Also, we're not even talking about our hearts here. Sometimes your heart needs to do the art, right? And you're paying to do the art because that's what your soul and your heart needs, okay? So tracking your numbers and understanding what's happening in your artistic finances doesn't have to mean you have to now change strategy because you need the numbers to look a certain way. I just want you to back with your full chest what you're doing with your money. And I want to make sure that the other money that's floating in your ecosystem, in your personal life, is able to fund what you're doing in your artistic life. So right now, like my Not Starving Artist funds my life. But then also when I was operating at a loss as an actor, when I was putting more money into my acting career last year than I was bringing in, my profit from my business was allowing me to invest more in my acting career, right? But I knew I had the cash flow to do that because I was aware of all of my numbers. Now remember, we're talking a lot about like bookkeeping, software, taxes, etc. This all can fit into 1 hour a month, your 1 hour a month financial CEO party. I have an acting career, a business, and my personal life, and I still manage all of my money and do my bookkeeping all in 1 hour a month. Okay, that's the financial CEO party method. That's one of the steps in the 4-step anti-budget money strategy, which again, I teach you in Cashed Up Creatives, my online course, okay? 1 hour a month. This does not have to be time consuming. So I want you to ask yourself, like, if you're afraid of looking at the numbers and tracking and doing this separation, like if this episode has like triggered you a little bit, I want you to ask, like, are you afraid of how much you're spending on your career? If you are, good, because that means you're betting on yourself. But are you aware of your bets? Are you aware of how much you're betting on yourself? Right? And do you like that? And I would venture to say you should get yourself to like that, right? And if you don't like it, see, then this is where the mindset work comes up, okay? When we look at the practical shit, when we look at your numbers, all of a sudden you might start having feelings of like, that's a lot of money and now I'm really scared and whatever. Or I'm not investing I had this epiphany a couple of years ago where I was like, I am investing so much money in my business, not nearly as much in my acting career. And yet my acting career is just as, if not more important than my business, right? So I had to reconcile with that as I was tracking my money, where I was like, I actually need to be investing more in my acting career. Okay. But you might have the opposite where you're like, oh, I'm investing a lot and that really scares me and I don't like it. And it's like, why though? Do you have a fear that it's not going to pay off? Right? Or is something coming up where you're finding that you're throwing money at your acting career to try and solve a problem that really the problem can only be solved with time, or honing your craft, doing stuff that you don't need to spend money for, but spending money is the easier thing to do, to feel like you're doing something when we're living in this career path that can be so fucking crazy making sometimes. As I check in to see, God damn it, didn't get a slot, 77 people away. Next time. That you can be in a career that's so crazy making, and sometimes it feels good to just be like doing something, throwing money at it to be able to. So maybe that's coming up for you, okay? But looking at your numbers and understanding your artistic career finances is going to bring all that shit up for you, which is a good thing. That is what you want. Tracking your expenses too and tracking your finances in your artistic career is going to help you to see what's actually worth it to spend money on and make more informed decisions. Because when you're tracking the numbers, you're inherently looking at the ROI, the fancy term for like, what am I getting for the money that I'm spending? So for example, when I spent money on headshots 2 years ago, I think, when I spent money on new headshots, I had the goal in mind where I'm like, if I'm going to spend $2,000 here, my desire for these headshots is that I am going to be able to get more audition requests on Actors Access, because the headshot is the first thing that's coming up, and I don't think my headshots are telling the story of who Brooke Tyler Benson is. So I want to get new headshots to tell that story, add in slate shots, and I feel really good about the footage that I have here, but this feels like the missing link. So I was looking at the number and then deciding what I wanted to see from it. Okay. And I did that. And then I saw an uptick in audition requests. So I was like, great, that was worth it. I don't feel bad about operating at a loss last year because I see that the $2,000 I spent on headshots increased my audition requests, which is exactly what I wanted from it. Right. When I spent when I first moved to New York, I think it was $1,200 on an acting intensive. And that felt like a lot of money, right? Just moving to New York and spending 2 weeks in an acting intensive. It was like all day, every day. I was a little bit scared, but I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm excited about this studio. Now that acting class, I can see the ROI that it has given me, even though it hasn't returned a financial ROI. That acting class gave me not only like friendships and people that I am now like very close to and still remain in contact with, but it resulted in someone from that class wrote a short film for 3 of us in the class to do, and we produced it. And it was the first short film I got to work on since moving to New York. One of those other classmates, she was the one that I worked with on producing and directing the show that went to the New York Theater Festival and won Best Short Production. And that was my New York City directorial debut. Now that show, she got accepted into the United Solo Festival, and I'm going to get to direct it again. And then also my first stage performance in New York, right? Where we decided to put on an equity showcase of a show and a role that I was really excited about doing with people from that class. So even though none of that was a big financial ROI, I'm able to see what that $1,200 has rippled into and feel really solid about that purchase. So when I see that I operated at a loss last year, I don't actually feel like it's a loss because I know exactly what those numbers meant for me in my life. So I want you to see that tracking is going to actually help you feel better about what you're spending money on in your acting career. Seeing big numbers isn't a bad thing. Seeing big numbers helps you understand what those big numbers are actually getting you. And then if you don't like it, and if you can't back that shit with your chest, great, then you've got some different work to do. But this is all going to bring you into more alignment of like, what do I actually want out of my artistic career? Is this actually sustainable long term? And like, feeling autonomy and confidence, because from that place, you have all the information Not just the artistic heart information, but the financial business information. And you, as the owner of your artistic career, you're the CEO. I'm CEO of Brooke Tyler Benson Inc., right? You are the CEO of your artistic career. And so from being the CEO, you get to make decisions, right? So much in artistic careers, we feel like we're at the whims, right, of the industries. Oh my God. And just like, it can feel so crazy making that you're waiting on things, or you're waiting for other people to give you validation or give you opportunities, or like you have to spend money on this because that's just how it is. But when you start looking at your numbers and you become the CEO of your artistic career, you're like, no, wait, I actually do have power here. I actually don't want to spend money on that thing. I actually would rather spend money on this thing because I've seen it prove with an ROI in the past. And you know what? I'm actually really proud of all the things that have come from the work I've been putting into my career. Like, it pulls you into the autonomous position. Autonomy, confidence. You are in charge. So that's where we're going to end today. I hope this was an empowering conversation. I hope you're leaving here with like education of like, I understand LLC versus sole proprietor. I understand taxes. I understand how I need to be tracking my expenses. But I also hope you feel more in control now, right? That you are in control here and you do have power, and that tracking and understanding doesn't have to be scary. It actually gets to be a very empowering tool in your artistic life. Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.